Are you searching for that voice of reason in these troubled times? Do some things just not make sense? We thought so too, and that's exactly how Dave, Richard, and I came together. My name is Kelsey, and the three of us are here to explore and seek the truth, expose corruption, and unravel and untwist media lies and propaganda. We are determined to help navigate through this unparalleled, extraordinary time in history with everyday people emphasizing open-mindedness, free thinking, and a desire to be empowered at the grassroots level, working with what nature has given us and protecting that from those who are exploiting it. Together, with the help of our listeners, we will sow acres of truth. You can visit our website at acresoftruth.com, and here you will find more information on how you can find us in places like YouTube, Rumble, Spotify and Apple Music, Twitter, and so much more. Hello, and welcome to our series outlining, explaining, and discussing the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Our goal is to educate everyday citizens about SDGs, what they are, what they mean, how the laws and policies that are and have been passed can and will affect us. Additionally, by learning and understanding these 17 goals, we can all become one step closer in helping to affect change in this world from a grassroots perspective. My name is Kelsey from Saskatoon, and I'm joined by Dave, Richard, and our special guest, Mark, Director and Founder of the Forum for Canadian Sovereignty. Welcome to SDGs and What You Need to Know. Greetings, gentlemen.
Greetings, Kelsey. It's Dave from Winnipeg, Ag Specialist.
Greetings, Kelsey. My name is Richard, and I'm a farmer from southern Saskatchewan.
Hi, Kelsey, Dave, and Richard. It's Mark here from Saskatoon, Director and Founder of the Forum for Canadian Sovereignty.
Welcome, gentlemen, and I'm Kelsey. I'm a small business owner in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. The format of this series is for us to read the SDG, discuss the targets, and break it down for everyday people to understand. Let's get started with Sustainable Development Goal number 4, quality education. Providing quality education for all is fundamental to creating a peaceful and prosperous world. Education gives people the knowledge and skills they need to stay healthy, get jobs, and foster tolerance. The COVID-19 outbreak, however, has caused a global education crisis. Most education systems in the world have been severely affected by education disruptions and have faced unprecedented challenges. School closures brought on the pandemic have had devastating consequences for children's learning and well-being. It is estimated that 147 million children missed more than half of their in-class instruction over the past 2 years. This generation of children could lose a combined total of $17 trillion in lifetime earnings in present value. School closures have affected girls, children from disadvantaged backgrounds, those living in rural areas, children with disabilities, and children from ethnic minorities more than their peers. I'd like to turn the mic over to Mark at this time to begin our discussion.
Yeah, so, here we go again, hyper-centralization of our education system so they can control from, again, an unelected, unaccountable foreign entity developing curriculum, developing indoctrination centers from a global perspective so that all children around the world are all indoctrinated with the same, indoctrination and the same curriculum. And our children are our future. And what we teach them has to be up to the parents. Again, it's this lowest common denominator, this radical decentralization that will best serve our children and what they're learning in school, rather than a global hyper-centralized, dictatorial curriculum that's set for everybody. So everybody's a robot, everybody's programmed, and and speaking of robots and programmed, and we also have the transhumanism element that's going to, work its way into our education system. And I mean, there's so many things that we have to be, and people need to be made abreast of and understand what's coming. But at the end of the day, it has to be developed. The parents have to take a leadership role in what curriculum is being taught to their children while their children are at government-run schools. And another thing that we're seeing because of this is a lot of parents are pulling their kids out of school and homeschooling them and creating, private schooling centers or, education centers that the parents then have direct control of the curriculum and what's being taught to their kids. And so, these globalists are taking advantage of, governments throughout the Western world that are ceding sovereignty to this entity, especially in terms of our education. And teacher unions are completely on board with this because, of course, unions are always friends with communists, and so they always fall in, and so they're using this as a mechanism to indoctrinate our youth and our children, so they become good, compliant, complacent little slaves ultimately.
Yeah, and I think slaves they will become, because when you look
Yes.
at our children, some of our brightest students are not able to excel because the curriculum has been dumbed down to pass everybody through. Everybody
Yeah.
gets a passing grade. Everybody gets a purple ribbon for participating. But the bright minds are not able to excel. They're not being pushed hard enough because we're too busy focusing on the majority. And I think we need to focus on pushing all kids through. I don't care what spectrum you are, whether you're on the special needs spectrum or you're just an average student. Square pegs
But
do not
this,
fit into round
yes,
holes.
absolutely, I couldn't agree more. But this is what communism does: is it dumbs everything down. Everything gets brought down to the lowest common denominator. That whoever's struggles the most in school, we have to change everything to accommodate that person instead of celebrating excellence and promoting excellence and gifted students, giving them, what they require, what they need. No, it's all about the lowest common denominator. Let's just, we'll feed that, and we'll develop curriculum that caters to those people. And the rest of us suffer, and the rest of society suffers, because when you have these kids that graduate from high school or graduate university, they're so fully indoctrinated, they're so fully entitled, they're so uneducated and dumbed down because of our system catering to, again, that lowest common denominator. There is no excellence, there is no, achievement, there's no celebration of excellence, and it's extremely detrimental to society as a whole.
Yeah, and our university students are graduating with more debt loads than we ever have historically. This is, it'll take them the next 10 years to repay back their student loans. The costs are just astronomical. And to your point about the parents here, this is a very valid point, and I really want parents to get involved, to be empowered to do so, but they're being stonewalled. When they attend the parent meetings, they are given a microphone for 2 minutes and then they get shut down. And that is not right. A lot of parents aren't public speakers. They aren't very good at vocalizing their concerns. And 2 minutes just is not enough. They give them, about a minute for introductions, and then you need to hit all your targets in the next minute. It's impossible. And when you are given, most parent meetings, you have 4 to 5 a year in a school semester, and the parents are not being given a voice. It's very shocking that the unions, that the principals are allowing this to happen in their schools, and in fact, they're the ones shutting it down, because many of the principals are sitting on these boards as well. and that we need
100%.
parents back in on it.
Yes, and it's a system that's been created to exclude the parent. It's by design because when you exclude the parent, it becomes this blob, right? And run by by the boards, and this is why I stress it's incredibly important that we as citizens and residents of particular provinces re-engage and take back our responsibility that we've abdicated to organizations, we've abdicated to politicians for decades, thinking they had our best interests at heart, when in fact they've only used that we've abdicated our responsibility to them to then institute things that we're seeing. And so parents, citizens need to re-engage and take back their responsibility. It's incredibly important. And I think a lot of people have been conditioned to not get involved, and they see the education system as daycare for their kids. So both parents can go and work and pay the bills. And this is the broader discussion around the economy. We live in this economy now where you can't survive on single income like you used to be able to, and one of the parents maybe stay home and raise the kids and be there for the kids when they come home from school, and question the teachers and question the school and be involved in parent-teacher interviews and associations and all these things. There's just not enough time in a parent's life to do that, it seems, because of the economic system we're in, where both parents are working, both parents are exhausted when they get home from work, and they're lucky, there's food on the table for the kids when they get home from school. Lots of challenges.
You have extracurricular as well. So that whether that's one night a week per child, let's say you have a household that's got 2 or 3 children in there, perhaps 4, you're committed to doing that event. And that often means a commute as well. So if your son or daughter is in hockey that requires a 25, 30-minute commute, this is going to be challenging. The other thing is on section 4.2, the target there is to pre-primary education. And you talked about abdicating responsibility. This is exactly what it does. It forces young children, basically they're still breastfeeding, then they're already being shipped off to daycare and pre-primary education centers, again, to conform to this mold that they perceive as being best for our children. And I can't see anybody knowing what's best for my child other than myself in my home environment. This is our responsibility as parents, and we need to take that very seriously.
It's actually kind of dehumanizing a population to make the oppression real. And what I mean about that is basically, each individual, regardless of potential, has always been encouraged when I went to school to do their best. And if whatever that best is has different levels on our marks of classes and stuff, but by dehumanizing us, basically, is they're trying to make that one brush, statement again, and by people feeling oppressed, right? So the strivers in sports that do really good, they strive to get a medal, they try to get that, to do the best they can. Well, somebody like myself that wasn't great at sports, I didn't play them, but I did a little bit in rec and stuff like that, and I didn't really care about the goal at the end. But that doesn't mean that I felt bad because I wasn't good at a sport or good at something. That means my talents are somewhere else. But nowadays, they have that to basically take that away, and they're doing it, and it's dehumanizing a population, because why, if you're good at something, why should you strive to be better? For what reason? They're taking that ability away from human beings, and that's what I mean by dehumanizing.
And I think about the university in section 4.3, where they want affordable universities for all students or all people, which is admirable. But when you look at our universities and our post-secondary education sectors, they are extremely top-heavy with administration. It's incredible how top-heavy they are. Because the pandemic, again, exposed what we can do as teachers and professors online with minimal equipment and a webcam. We could be teaching classrooms of 200, 300, 500 students at any given time. And all as they needed at their end was an internet connection and basically a smartphone. So for us to have these great big buildings, these huge facilities, all these nice things, they are nice, and I'll give them that. But it costs money to run these organizations. And again, it's tax dollars that pay for it, way above and beyond the tuition costs. And our tuition costs are going up every year, 3.5% last year. It is becoming unattainable for a lot of average students. And when you're, like a med student, you're saddled with $180,000 debt. How are you going to repay that? How can you have a home? How can you start a family? How can you live? You need some serious revenue to pay that off. And these med students are going in on 15 and 17 years before they are debt-free, just from their student debt. And it's just, the universities are taking advantage of this, and so is every other post-secondary education.
That's a common theme throughout, all bureaucracies, and education's no different. Is this top-heavy, where you have all these middle managers and all these people in management positions. It should be about the teachers. It should be about the professors. It should be about the people that are on the front line speaking with the kids, whether it's education or healthcare or anything to do with government. It's always top heavy. It's always, the system taking advantage of the taxpayer. It's always like that. And that's, and now we're moving into something that's even a larger bureaucracy, on a global scale. It's just we're headed in the absolute wrong direction. Again, it has to be, with education, it has to be the parents dictating to the schools, to the teachers, what you're going to teach my children, what I want my children to be taught, because I'm the one paying taxes here. And we have to take back that responsibility and hold our governments accountable, that are controlling these education institutions and being steamrolled by unions. We need strength, we need courage, we need conviction, we need governments that are going to represent the best interests of the people and the individual rather than the collective.
Well, and we're being steamrolled into worthless diplomas and degrees. We have students that are graduating four-year programs, 5-year programs from gender studies. There is no career in gender studies beyond 1 or 2, let's say, that work for the Liberal government or, are doing some gender equality study for the next airplane design or something like that. But yeah, we are creating a good chunk of our generation that with post-secondary education cannot hold down a mediocre part-time job. They're struggling to pay their bills.
But does it not, Dave? I mean, it brings it into two classes of people, which they themselves have defined in the targets. It says basically 4.3 by 2030, ensure equal access for all women and men to affordable and quality technical, vocational, and technical education, including university. Isn't that interesting? But then you go read 4.5 and it says eliminate gender disparities in education to ensure equal access of levels of education for vocational training and for the vulnerable, including persons with disabilities, Indigenous people, and children with vulnerable situations. Well, isn't that interesting that they've already thrown the Indigenous peoples in with basically, the same people with disabilities? I mean, that isn't fair by their own two rules, 4.3 and 4.5. They've already made almost a distinction of class of how they want to separate people as a whole, which is somewhat racist, what they use nowadays, is it not?
Well, you're exactly right, because they are discriminating based on gender. And so there's a lot of fields and a lot of careers that are particularly suited to one gender, whether it's a male or female. We have, look at nursing. It's predominantly women that are in that field. Men are not typically interested in that field. And you look at agriculture, that is shifting now a little bit, but that was typically a 70-30 split. We're narrowing on 50-50 now. But you go to mining, you look at some trades, plumbers, that is primarily dominated by one industry, or like by one gender. Same with welders. How many female welders do you see on the pipelines? I haven't seen any. So,
are you suggesting there's only two genders? Are you a bigot?
Uh-oh.
oh, Mark, you know me.
Yeah, there's a can of worms.
Soup, and okay. So let's look at biology. In 50 years, or 100 years, or maybe 1,000 years, when an archaeologist is going to come and excavate my body, perhaps Kelsey's body or yours, and we're going to look at the bone structure, and we are going to come up with two genders, because just because you chose that's science. We can
not your feelings.
Not my feelings. Nope. Go dig up King Tut and tell me what gender he's at or she's at. You decide.
You had to throw that in there.
Oh, you know I would.
Well,
but that's what they're doing, and this is how they indoctrinate, a culture. This is how they change culture, is through education, through our school system, and through our children. And this is how they've managed to be so successful at what they've done over decades.
Yeah.
And it's through our education system, because parents have abdicated that responsibility to other people.
Yeah.
And we need to take back that control. We need to take control of our schools, and we need to dictate to the teachers what they're going to teach little Johnny and little Susie.
One last point here on the homeschooling and the trend we saw in Manitoba. We saw a lot of families opt for homeschooling, but this last cycle, I would say all, if not more, of the students that signed up for homeschooling were now back in public school. And this isn't by accident. The families were squeezed, they were pushed financially, and they were burdened with a job that they were never, that they didn't grow into. Suddenly, they've got 2, 3, 4 children at home, and they had to figure out a whole new schedule. In most cases, the woman of the family stayed at home and went on a leave from her job, or in some cases kept her job and was working from at home trying to educate students. And so that failed miserably for a lot of families. Not everybody's cut out to educate their children. But that's not to say that we need to neglect our public schools by letting them go for a free-for-all and we just take out our kids and homeschool them. We need to uphold our educators and our education system to a much higher standard and not let them get away with what they're getting with now with this gender ideology and all this other nonsense that's coming through the way. Because our kids need to be educated. They do not need to be confused.
Right.
Confusion. If you're of mature age and you decide you want to change whatever you are, have at it. Those children are of age to make that decision based on quality knowledge. Because I'm seeing the reverse now. We've seen people that have transitioned, in some cases shaved off body parts, and now they're 30 and 40 years old. They've had this experiment in their pocket for 10, 20 years. Well, not 20, 10 plus years of the individual that I'm thinking of, and they would like to revert back.
And they're completely regretting it.
Yeah, they are regretting it, but
you can't undo it.
You can't undo it, and they've become so dependent on the drugs and all these hormone inhibitors. Now it is difficult, if not impossible, to undo, and it's coming at the expense of everyday citizens because, again, this falls under healthcare. Why are we paying for gender reassignment one day only to remove it the next day and bottlenecking our healthcare system with this nonsense for people that didn't know what they were getting themselves involved in?
When you're looking at the education system, which we should hold in the highest regard to make sure the standards are kept. But at some point I kind of question, because although I haven't seen it with my own eyes, but I've seen different articles, I think out of Ontario, that, students that want to call themselves a cat, so they're installing litter boxes. And it's like, so at what point do the educators say, I think we have a mental problem here. Maybe this student needs a little bit of psychiatric evaluation. But no, you promote that instead, because anybody can feel good to do whatever they want. And that to me is a mental problem. And that's really, I think, of what a lot of these, because of what we're seeing in a lot of problems in the world, is this mental issue that is promoting craziness. So I don't know. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, and Richard, this reminds me of years ago when I was in school, and perhaps they're still doing it today, is a spirit week. So for 1 week, you could dress up whatever costume you wanted to be. Whether you wanted to be Superman, Wonder Woman, you wanted to be Catwoman, you wanted to be whoever, that was the week to do it. And when the week was done, that was done. And next week, we're back in school doing things.
You guys know I like to shake things up a little bit, and I know we've exhausted this subject, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about the education system and the indoctrination that's happening in it, both for our youth and our post-secondary education. One of the things that came to my attention quite unexpectedly back in circa 2013, 14. Actually, it was probably more like 15, I guess, leading up to the election of Justin Trudeau. My daughter, and as a single mom and parent, we're a very busy family. I have 2 athletes in my family. So not only did they have their school extracurricular activities, they had, their outside clubs and whatnot that they were participating in. Not to mention I was working full-time managing another business at the time. So, it can be very easy for things to fly over our heads when we're busy and we're, grinding away and whatever. And I will always, encourage parents and those of the parents that are listening to this right now. I couldn't more strongly encourage more than ever now to ensure you're having conversations with your children and you're keeping the lines of communication open. My daughter came home from school one day and asked me this. She said, "Mom, why are the teachers pushing Justin Trudeau down our throat?" And that was the day that everything stopped for me. I had no idea. I had no idea that, and she went on to tell me everything that was going on, what they had been doing for weeks, that the focus in school for weeks was the election. And that all they spoke about was how important it would be to vote for Justin Trudeau, that they would have a mock election and that they should vote for Justin Trudeau in this mock election. I went into the school and I had a discussion with both the vice principal and the principal at the time, asking questions. And so this was around the time when I became a lot more aware of what exactly was going on in our schools and how the government is playing a role in influencing our youth. Now, this is something that's extremely insulting to my intelligence as a mother, first and foremost, and also someone who deeply cares about the education of our youth. So I guess I'd just like to hear your guys' comments on this and why our education systems are so heavily involved in all of this influence and indoctrination.
Well, it's no secret that the Liberal parties, the NDP, all the parties on the left, traditionally, cater to unions and cater to teachers' unions. And so their natural delivery to the children, to their students, is to promote the parties or the government that's going to be most beneficial to their career and to their bank accounts. And so, I mean, I've experienced this for a very long time. Most of my adult life, I've seen that corruption within government services, education, healthcare, you name it. It's all run by unions, and the corruption between unions and government is rampant. And this is why unions play such a large role in this agenda. And this is why they need the unions to be on board to help promote this agenda. And rest assured, they are. Because, again, it's all about the collective, right? It's not about the individual. It's about the collective. And so it's sort of a natural happenstance that you have unions that pander to Liberals or NDP or whoever the government is of the day in each province, and then rail against, the quote unquote conservative, even though there's really the establishment conservative is so far to the left because they've all agreed to this agenda and naturally are dragged to the left by this agenda, which is, the Communist Manifesto on steroids. So it is what it is, and so again, it has to fall back on the parents. The parents have to be involved. The parents have to re-engage. The parents have to take back their responsibility and start dictating to these teachers and teachers unions what they're going to teach their children, and keep politics out of it. You're not there to promote your party or promote, your career.
And so, Mark, I'm going to throw this at you here because the climate change thing, and I know that's a topic we're going to hit on, but we have a situation at a post-secondary institution right now where the theme of the day is, if we do not continue to vote Liberal, we will not get the grants that are needed to do climate change studies. And it's very important that we do this. So if you are voting for anybody other than Liberal, you are potentially jeopardizing what we may or we may not find, because with the Liberals, you're guaranteed this money that's coming. It's kind of like the pot at the end of the rainbow.
Absolutely.
And so this is
100%.
coming, and I know we're talking lots about grade school, but this is coming from a post-secondary level where professors are concerned about grants and who the government of the day is. And that's very concerning because we all know that these instructors play a pivotal role in our children's lives and to what they believe or don't believe. And it's a very slippery slope, and we need to be that.
100%. But the whole grant program is political, right? I mean, all of these grants that are issued by whatever the government of the day is, if it's the SAS party, or if it's the NDP or whatever, UCP or NDP in Alberta, the grant program is politics. It's ensuring that different groups are going to make sure, based on the grants we're giving you, that you support our government when it comes time for an election, and make sure that your people are supporting us in the next election. And so it all boils down to politics. And this is why, I put up a tweet earlier today. I was talking about corruption and the people allowing the corruption to manifest and to, exacerbate itself, only because we don't want to take the time to hold these people accountable. And that in turn makes us corrupt as a people. As a society, we're corrupt if we're not holding these people to account, and we're not feeding into this corruption and payoff, pay to play, all this stuff.
And you see that fall out in the big pharma as well. And crop science, like when we look at whether it's the Bayers, BASFs, and I'm not singling anyone out, I don't exempt any of them, but when they're paying to do a study or a research program, they want the data that showcases their product as being the best. And I can't help but wonder how often those results get skewed because the person who's doing the trial knows who's paying the bill for that trial. And if the results don't match up, are they going to get a second kick? I don't think so. The money the following year may or may not be available. And I think that's a huge risk many of these people are not willing to take. And that's begs the question, because provincially and the federal government alike, we used to do a lot of our own research, but now we have subletted everything, including the people, to big pharma and big corporations, and it's a revolving door. One day they're working for the government, the next day they're working for big pharma, and the month after that or the year after that, they're back working for the government. So it's a continuous cycle where we are not being given the data that we, I think, legitimately deserve as a country, because it's all skewed in one direction, and that's the direction of who's got the biggest money.
Which I don't really understand. Even instructors themselves, they must feel, especially the older instructors, they must feel that this is a really attack on their profession, because the standards of their teaching has actually, you're watching it be eroded. I think we should ask some instructors that question, because that's what they're doing by upholding all these things.
So here's what I see, Richard. I think these instructors are retiring because they're making good money, and so they're retiring and just cashing out because they're sick and tired of going against the grain, for being alienated from their peers. They are not going to stick it out, and they've put money aside. They have good pensions. They have everything going for them, and they're just cashing out. And we saw that, with today's announcement. And again, I won't get too political on this, but we had 10 of our 36 party members basically tender the resignation at the end of their term. They will not be running for re-election. That's a big chunk. And they're all saying, yes, it's retirement. And granted, if people can retire, have at it. That's your own decision. But I just find that when the screws are tightening so much, people are just checking out. And we saw that with our healthcare, our nurses. Their pension was ripe, the time was right, and they were not going to put up with the nonsense. Thanks, I've done my 20 years, 30 years, whatever their term was, and it's time for me to cash in and let somebody else run it, and run it into the ground as I see it.
Does that answer your question, Kelsey?
Yes, thank you guys. I think we're good, and we can probably start to wrap this one up. That's a wrap, folks. You've been listening to an Acres of Truth special edition podcast series. We would like to thank you so much for joining us in this journey. If you found this episode valuable, please share it with others on your social media platforms. Be sure to check out our website, acresoftruth.com, for more information on other podcasts and where you can find them. Additionally, feel free to send your questions or comments to info@acresoftruth.com. Thanks again for listening.